This segment sponsored by Foster Financial. Welcome to Money Monday, where we give you holistic financial advice to help you throughout your week and, of course, through your retirement. And joining me today is Foster Financial's Vice President, Caleb Doan. Hi. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so we have a lot of things to talk about. I don't know, Caleb, did something kind of happen over this past weekend?
The whole political news cycle has just been wild over the past couple weeks. So
yes.
I mean, there's an assassination attempt, there was the RNC, Joe Biden dropped out, everyone's kind of backing Kamala Harris on the Democrat side.
Right.
So things are moving pretty quick.
They are. And of course, when we have big national movement like that, it always impacts our finances in so many ways.
Yeah.
But today, we're going to dive into how this presidential election could impact people's actual portfolios, right? Their investment sectors. So tell me an overview. Why does that happen?
Yeah, so I would say the overall stock market, if you're looking at like the S&P 500, for example, it's sometimes hard to determine which way it's going to move based on who's elected, right? Because there's a lot of other factors that probably have a more pronounced impact than just whether it's a Republican or a Democrat in office. So, I mean, interest rates, corporate profits, inflation, unemployment, all that stuff has a much larger impact on how the market moves. But when you drill down into certain sectors, those can sometimes be at least a little bit more partisan, where you can kind of anticipate, these sectors generally maybe do a little bit better under a Republican, or these do a little bit better under a Democrat. And so those are the things that we're looking at. We actively manage our clients' portfolios, and so we've told them, hey, depending on what happens with this election, there will be some changes to the portfolio. It's not going to be a massive shift, but there's certainly some things we'll maybe add more weight to or take weight off of, depending on who gets elected.
That's so fascinating. So there are pros and cons, essentially, with each side or who gets elected. So let's start on the Republican side. Let's say in November, Donald Trump is elected. What does that do to one's portfolio?
Yeah, so generally some of the sectors that can benefit from a Republican president are some of those that like deregulation. So generally the Republican side is a little bit more for reducing regulation in certain industries. The financial sector, so banks can sometimes benefit from that when there's deregulation. The energy sector can sometimes benefit as well, although that's very impacted by global changes, not just things in the United States. So that's one thing to keep an eye out for. Another thing that Trump has talked about too is putting lots of tariffs on foreign goods. So it's these tariffs that foreign companies have to pay to be able to bring stuff into the United States. He's talked about tariffs on Chinese steel, for example. And so if he put large tariffs on that would hurt those foreign steel companies. It would help domestic steel companies that don't have to pay those tariffs. And so that's one of the things that we would look at as well. Maybe the last one on the Republican side, defense and aerospace spending. So one of the things that Trump did back in 2016 that he's talked about continuing to do if he were to get elected is building up the military, and so some of those companies in that industry would benefit as well.
Benefit, yeah. And then if prices do increase overseas, that would increase what we pay for them if they do come from overseas.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean that's one of the counterpoints to the tariffs is that it could raise costs for people domestically here. So it could hurt consumers but help businesses. So there's always kind of a balancing of that.
Okay, so now let's hypothetically say Kamala Harris wins in November. What does that do for the sectors?
Yeah, so one of the sectors that I'd say would probably benefit would be the renewable energy sector. One of the things that she's talked about a lot, she says she loves the electric buses is one of her kind of talking points. And generally on the Democrat side, they're a little bit more oriented towards reducing those internal combustion engines, moving more towards EVs. So that's one of the things they've talked about phasing out over the next 15 years is those internal combustion engines. So renewable energy could certainly see a spike if we saw Kamala Harris become president. And then maybe another one on the Democrat side would be the healthcare sector. The healthcare sector can be a good defensive sector regardless of what the market does. Typically, healthcare can do okay. But one of the kind of pieces of the Democrat agenda is increasing access to healthcare. Right? And so if there's more people who are able to participate in that system, that can generally help some of those big insurance companies. It can help the pharmaceutical companies. And so that's one of the things that we look at as well.
Right. And that would directly impact individuals because they would have access to health care, and then the lower cost on prescription drugs is a part of that factor too. Okay, so when you're deciding, and I'm trying to get into the Caleb strategy mind. When you're deciding these things, does it matter where your specific client's portfolio currently sits or where they're wanting to go? So let's say that they are in position in some of the platforms that will impact them if a Republican is elected. Would you then try to switch or balance them out so they get a fair chance either way?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of look at, where things are trending, who's expected to actually win. But yeah, there are a lot of people that maybe have outsized, weights in their portfolio within certain sectors. So, I mean, Steel Dynamics and Nucor, they're big companies around here. There's people that have, a really significant portion of their portfolio in those positions. Raytheon is a defensive company. It's around here. There's a lot of people that have that in their 401k if they're working at Raytheon. Eli Lilly is another big company that a lot of people have invested in. They're in the healthcare industry here. And so there are people that we find that have really large portions of their portfolio in those companies. And so that's a big conversation that we have with them is, hey, depending on the election, it could impact this. Maybe let's try to balance this out. Let's add some diversification here just in case it goes, the opposite way and it's no longer beneficial for your portfolio.
Wow. Well, that's a lot to think about, to track. That's why we need a financial advisor like you to keep up with those numbers for us. Thank you so much, Caleb, for giving us kind of behind the veil what happens as we're going through this exciting election period.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you would like more information about Foster Financial, we'll have their phone number listed below to give them a call for a complimentary consultation. And I'll see you after the break. This segment sponsored by Foster Financial.